Hey everybody, bloody finger. This is just the intro video to, or intro thing to the second video on music theory using this printout. In this one we're going to be discussing what it means to play in a key, how to build chords in that key, where the chords come from, why they are what they are, and we'll discuss beginning to use a number notation or Nashville notation. And we'll actually look at analyzing the primary colors, which is just, that's my way of saying just the basic 1, 3, 5s, all the chords that are made, the basic chords, analyzing those, what do they have in common, that kind of thing. All right, playing in a key. I don't think my document camera likes me going back and forth with the piano, which is unfortunate. But a chord, start out with this. A chord is a group of notes in harmony at the same time. You can play one note, a C, and you can play multiple notes together, like C and G, C and E, C and D. The closer together they get, the more difficult it is to do. Well, I guess that one was a good example. That's two. So that's C sharp and D. So not so great. Not so great. That was B flat and B. But the farther apart they get, the better they sound. C and F, C and G. That one's not so bad either. No. Anyway, you can have 3. You have lots. Those are all chords. Okay. So chords are just multiple notes played together. Awesome stuff. All right, so if we're playing in a key, the key means that we are, as a group, band or whatever, we have decided that we're going to play within the confines, the limits of a major scale, and only in the major scale. Now, we can break rules and go out of it every once in a while, but in general, we're playing in the major scale, and everything is, all the numbers, all those chords are all based off of that major scale. So for example, if we were going to say we're going to play in the key of G, we would only be able to play notes from the major scale, G major scale. We already found what the G major scale was. So root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Okay, so this is the major scale coming from the chromatic scale. We had a starting point at G, and we did our formula like said above. Okay, so there's no mystery here. Anyway, I'm gonna keep going. So these are pretty much the only notes we play in the key of, they are the only notes we play in the key of G. So that's pretty simple, right? All the chords, all the melodies, all the things are made up of only these notes. So, or groups of these notes. That kind of demystifies it a little bit. But a chord, there are 2 basic kinds of chords, and those are major and minor chords. There's other ones, but for the most part, they fall into these 2 categories of major and minor chords. In our music, you're only going to be playing major and minor chords. That's just the way it is for worship music. But most chords are slight variations of these structures. All the other ones we get are, most of them are variations of those. So generally speaking, if we're just going to make this simple, strict this basic chord, the chords are made out of the formula 1, 3, 5. All right. So this means that the 1 is the starting note. It's usually the note that gives the chord the name, and the 3rd is the 3rd note up in that key. It's the 3rd note up from whatever that starting point is in that key. So it's almost like making a major scale out of a chromatic scale. This time we're just making this formula out of these. So I'll show you what that is. But it is important that we note what the intervals between these different things are for the major and the minor. That'll tell us some things. But so there's going to be a distance between 1 to 3, a distance between 3 to 5, and also between 1 to 5. So let's get into it. So we're keeping in the key of G here. A minor chord is also derived from the formula 1, 3, 5. But it has a little bit different intervals than the major scale, or the major chord, obviously. Otherwise, it'd be a major chord. but we will look at those together. We will come back to those pieces and fill those in a minute, or I don't know, a few minutes, whatever. So as stated before, generally speaking, the chords are made out of that formula 1, 3, 5. This means that the 1 is the starting note, the 3 is the third note up from the starting note in the key. So here's how it works. I'll show you how to make them. Here is our G scale, G major scale. It's 2 octaves, so from G to G and G to G. So let's start with a G major chord. Now we can only make chords. We only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different notes in the key. We repeat at G. So we can only make 7 different chords here. 1, 3, 5s, that is. So let's start with the G. All right, if our G major chord, that means our starting place is the G. And we're using this major scale. So if I started with a G, and let's say I said, okay, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's just in order from G. Well, our third would be B, and our fifth would be D. Okay, I'm going to do something on this page, but I'm gonna like make a little tick mark for every half step that's represented. So there's a G sharp, there's an A sharp, there's a, oops, that was dumb. There's no B sharp, there's nothing between there. C sharp, D sharp, there's an F in between there. No F, no half step between F sharp and G. There's one here, here, not one there, here, here, and here. Those are different notes that we might be skipping. Okay, so that's coming from this. I just added in the notes that we were missing, that we skipped. But anyway, so if we look at the intervals, the interval from the 1 to the 3rd, from G to B, is 1 half step, another half step, another half step, and another half step. That's 4 half steps. So 2 whole steps. Awesome. From the 3rd, B, to D, we have a half step, half step, half step. So it's 3 half steps. So in other words, 1.5 steps. So obviously if you put those together, from 1 to 5, you have 3.5 steps, because math. Anyway, so those are the intervals there. That's kind of fun. I'll show you those in a second. But let's do the C. So if we start with C this time, so instead I'm going to start right here. So if I start there at the C, and that now becomes my 1, my numbering would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so from C, the C chord would be made 1, 3, and 5. So C, E, and G. That's how a C major chord is built, or the C chord is built. And when it actually ends up being a major chord, I'll explain why that is later. Well, yeah, I will. So the distance between C to E is actually 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps again. So 2 whole steps. And then from 3, the E, to the G, which was the 5, half, half, half. So there's 1.5 steps between 3 and 5. So obviously that makes the 1 to 5, 3.5 steps. All right, let's skip over and do the D, which is here. That's my starting point now. So I'm going to start with D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 3rd was F sharp, 1 was D, 3rd was F sharp, and A. So if we look at their intervals, see that was the guy that's bleeding. He was earlier anyway. All right, so from D to F sharp, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps again, so 2 whole steps. From F sharp to A, which was the 5th, half, 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 so 1.5 steps. Cool. So obviously, again, 3.5 steps. All right. Now I'm telling you that's a major chord. You might not understand why it's a major chord. but it is a major chord. We'll get back to that in just a second. All right. Where are you? Next page, page 9. Minor chords. You don't know why they're minor yet, technically, if this is all you know so far. But I'm telling you they're minor, and we will explore why they are in a minute. So the minor chords, let's go with an E. Okay. If I do E, that actually is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th note in the scale of G, the G major scale. We're looking at the 6th note. So that's, and so if we go to make that chord, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 3rd was G, and the 5 was B. Again, 1, 2, 3, G, 4, 5, B. Okay, so I'm going to do that thing again where I write all the in-betweens where there's another note. Remember, there's no half step between B and C on the chromatic scale. But we have an F. We have one between, yeah, anyway, you get the idea. G sharp, there it is. There's not one there. There's one. Yeah. Okay. So, if I calculate the distance here between E and the 3rd, we have 1, 2, 3 half steps. So that's 1.5 step, or 3 half steps is 1.5 steps total. 1.5 whole steps. All right, from G, which was the 3rd, to B, is half, 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 half. That's 4 half steps. That's 2 whole steps. Okay, which makes the 1 to the 5, 3.5. So, one thing I'm already seeing is, now you might not understand, well, we haven't explained why yet, but a major chord, all these major chords, between the 1 and the 3, there was 2 whole steps. And between the 3 and the 5, it was 1.5 steps. 1 and 5 was 3.5. So far, with a minor chord, the only difference is that these intervals have switched. So let's just see if it keeps going. If we go to the 2nd note of the G major scale, we started at A. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 1 was the A, 3 was the C, 5 was the E. So let's look at the interval between 1 and 3. Half, half, half. That's 3 half steps. So 1.5 whole steps. And you're probably going to guess it. From C, from the 3rd to the 5th, half, 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 half. 4 half steps is 2 whole steps. Okay, which makes the 1 to 5. Put together, that's 3.5 steps. So far, the same intervals as the top one, obviously. And you probably guessed it. The 3rd note of the scale, of the G major scale, is the 3rd is the B. So if we start there and make a chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 1st is B, the 3rd is D, and the 5 is F sharp. Okay. So looking at those intervals again, we have 1/2, 1/2, 1/2. So 3 half steps, 1.5 wholes. Okay, from D to F sharp, half, 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 half. That's 2 whole steps. So again, we have this minor, the minor chords, what I'm telling you is a minor chord. It has a 1.5 steps at the beginning, whereas the major chord had 2 wholes in the beginning and 3.5 between 1 and 5. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a second, and I'm just going to kind of look at those again. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our G major, and my dock camera was not liking the piano earlier, so I'm going to stay away from it. Okay, so if I have a G chord, all the chord that we learned for the key of G, that one, that's all G's, B's, and D's. So is the one that we use for the key of G, or key of C. Okay, that's a major chord. The distance between 1st and 3rd is 2 whole steps. Okay? Kind of sounds nice, happy. Here's the C major chord. D major chord. Okay, that's how they sound like. Now let's talk about the minors. I'm just going to play a couple of these minors. So E minor would be A minor, B minor. Notice they have like a different sound. It's like sadder. Okay, so again, I want to go back to this real quick and make this a little bit more explicit, hopefully. So what makes a major chord is that the interval between 1 and 3 is two whole steps. Okay? What makes a minor chord is that the interval between 1 to 3 is 1.5 steps. Okay? So then the interval between the 5th and 3rd are different too. But notice that their 1 to 5 is all the same. So really the only difference is that the 3rd has been flatted on a major chord to a minor chord. If I wanted to make this G major a minor chord, all I would need to do is flat the 3rd. Okay, so make it a B flat instead of a B. And then the distance would be 1.5 here and 2 here. So I just want to take a second here and explore what a minor would sound like. Okay, so if we did a G minor, or G major, here's G major. Kind of sounds nice and happy. Here is a G minor. Not very happy, very sad. Happy, that's major. Here's the minor, just flatting the 3rd. Sounds sad, okay? So the difference there between that one interval of having a flat 3rd versus a regular major 3rd, it makes a sad sound, okay? So it's kind of a powerful difference. For the only thing being different between a major chord and a minor chord being a flat 3rd, that's a powerful difference. So it is something to make note of, is that your minor chords have a sad sound and the major chords have a kind of a happy sound. All right, now let's take a look at this last one, and that's the chord that's made from the 7th note of the key. So if we're in the key of G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th note, let's start there. If we make a chord out of that, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have a F, G, C, or F sharp, G, C. Oh, sorry. F sharp, A, C, my bad. Okay, F sharp, A, C. Let's explore those intervals. So from F sharp to A, half, half, half. So that's 1.5 steps. So it is a minor interval, a flat 3rd. But from our A to the C, half, half, half. Ooh. I really wish I could play this on the piano, but the dock camera was not playing nice with it. So I might have to do it differently. Okay. So here is this one is different. This one is the only one like it. And I will tell you, I'll demonstrate maybe. So if I were to do an F sharp chord, oh man. So it'd have to be. Where'd my F sharp be? So, nope. Oh, I can't even do it there. The problem with the guitar is that your fingers aren't. Okay, so an F sharp major chord would be here. F sharp minor would be here. Sadder. And this guy is kind of sounds very strange. We don't use that one much in contemporary modern pop or worship. This would actually be called a diminished chord, as it is right here. Now if we add the 7th to it, or if we add the next if we add a seventh to it, actually does not become diminished anymore. You can't make a full diminished chord in this key, but that's neither here nor there. It'd be called a half diminished, but whatever. These three notes together are a diminished chord. But yeah, that one's an unusual sound. It's very odd, kind of wild sounding, out of pocket maybe, not the norm that you're used to hearing, and that's why. And we really don't use it much. Thankfully, the finger positions are very unfriendly for the guitar for open things. But anyways, so to put this all back into full circle, a major chord, what makes a major chord is that it has this specific, oh, I'm out of lead. It has this specific set of intervals where from the first to the third, you always have two whole steps. That was the worst handwriting ever. Between the third and the five, you always have 1.5 steps. I don't know why I'm doing that. And 3.5 steps between 1 and 5. But really the key here for your memory should be, for the most part, the big difference with a major scale or a major chord, 1 to 3 is 2 whole steps. And on a minor, that 1 to 3 is 1.5 steps. So it's like a minor is a flat third from a major. And it makes this powerful difference of that sad, melancholy sound. Anyways, yeah, if you have a standard 1 to 5 of 3.5, that's what 6 out of the 7 chords in a key are. The 1, instead of, since it's a flat 5, it's called a diminished. If we have a sharp 5, that's actually called an augmented chord. But that's, again, neither here nor there. So we're going to move on, and we're going to do a couple more keys. We're already at 20 minutes for this video, so I might kind of move it along here. But I think it's good exercise to do. So we might not do all these keys, but maybe we will. This might just be a longer video. Okay, so making the G sharp scale to chromatic scale. All right. So to make a D scale, D major scale, I think we already did this, but we start with D, and we go root, whole, so D, E, root, whole, whole, half. So we have F sharp and G. And that's just from the major scale formula. And then we're at this half step, so we have whole, 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 half. So what I saw there was A, B, C sharp, and D. All right, I'm just going to make another octave. So I'm just repeating the pattern. We already have the D, so E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. Okay, so if I'm going to make the 1 chord, or the first note in the scale is D. So if I'm going to start there, be 1, 3, A for the 5. Now if I looked at the distances between D and F sharp, we have half, 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 half. That's 4, that's 2 whole steps. So this is a major chord. Okay? If we did the second note of the key, which would, if we started at E and made our chord there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, E, G, B. And again, if I compared what that minor, what that third is from E to G, we have half, half, half. That's 1.5 steps. So this interval being 1.5 steps instead of 2 whole steps is a minor chord. And that's a 1 to 5. The 7th note of the scale we're going to ignore from here on out. It's the diminished one. but the rest of these are going to be either major or minor. The 1 through 6 will be major or minor. All right, so let's start with the third note of the scale, F sharp. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, F, A, C sharp. And again, if I look at that F to A interval here in the chromatic scale, F to A, oh sorry, F sharp to A, half, half, half. 1.5 steps. So this guy is a minor chord. All right. The fourth note of the scale is G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, G, B, D. If we're looking at the chromatic scale between G and B, the third, 1 and 3 of our chord, 1 and 3, we have whole, 2 whole steps. So that is a major chord. Okay. Fifth note of the scale from A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A, C sharp, E. Nice. That's all the scales, or all the chord. Yeah, well, I don't want. Never mind. Don't listen to me for that. All right. So A to C sharp. We have half, 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 half. 2 whole steps, 4 halves. That also is a major chord. The sixth note of the scale, B. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. B, D, F sharp. Oh, not E sharp, F sharp. Okay, so if I look at the chromatic scale from B to D, which was our third, half, half, half. 1.5 steps, which makes it a minor chord. Okay, so I find it, we need to like just take a, we'll take a look back here. I notice that in the key of D, my 1 chord, the chord based on the first note of the scale, is major. The second note, when I make a chord out of that, it's a minor. Third note, when I make a chord out of that, it's a minor. Fourth note, when I make a chord out of that, it's a major. Fifth note, chord out of that, it's a major. Sixth note, it's a minor. Now let's take a look back at our 3 majors from the key of G. We had the 1, the 4, and the 5 were all majors. 1, 4, 5. All those are majors here too. We had, in the key of G, the one we just did before, the 6th note, 2nd note, and 3rd note. When we made chords out of those, they were all minor. Okay, going back to this, 2nd, 3rd, and 6th. All of those are minors. And guess what? So far, that's the pattern. We used it based off of the same intervals. The major scale, no matter where you start it, the intervals are the same. And the major scale formula is the same. So, lo and behold, that will be the same pattern everywhere. 1st, 4th, and 5th are all going to be major. 2nd, 3rd, and 6th are all going to be minor. All right? I'm going to do one more. I hope that's not terribly too fast of information. I'm going to skip the B flat. Oh, the title got moved. Let's do all the chords in the key of C. This one's going to be nice because there's no sharps or flats. We already did the C scale, had no sharps or flats. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. But maybe I should go back and just touch on that just for review. So if we're starting here, if that's our root, the formula is root, whole, D, whole, E, half, whole, 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 half. We just skipped all the sharps and flats. I don't know if that's lucky or how you view that, but it's easier to see. S-E-E. All right, so I have 2 octaves there. If I wanted us to use the 1 chord, the first note. C, 1, 3, 5. Or sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. C, E, G. Okay. And again, if I look here, that interval between C and E, the 1 and the 3, is 1, 2, 3, 4 halves. 2 whole steps, which makes it a major chord. Second chord, according to the other pattern, the second, third, and sixth were all minors. The other ones were majors. Okay, so let's try it. The 2 chord, if we start with the second note of the scale, D, and we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, D, F, A. And the interval between D and F, the first and third, half, half, half. 1.5 steps, so that's a minor. Beautiful. The third chord, E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, E, G, B. And the distance between the third and the first, 1 and 3, E, G, B, is 1, 2, 3 half steps. So that's a minor chord also. Nice. So far so good. These should be majors according to our other pattern. The 4 would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll start on F and we'll make a chord out of that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. F, A, C. And so if we looked at the interval between first and third, F and A, half, 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 half. 2 whole steps. So that is a major chord. Oh, isn't that nice? All right, the 5 chord. So you're probably getting it by now, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, G, B, D. If we explore the first and the third there, G to B, half, 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 half. That's 4 half steps, 2 whole steps, which would make it a major chord. Same thing that our pattern suggests. Okay, the 6 minor, or the 6 chord. If we do the major scale and we went up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we started there, it made a chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It'd be A, C, E. And again, if we explore the interval between the first and third, we would have A to C, which is from A, half, half, half. 1.5 steps. That is a minor chord. So a couple things for notation. Whenever you're going to see the chords in practice, in a chord chart or wherever else, the 1 chord we based it off of the first note being C, and if it's a major chord, we're just going to put a capital letter. So the 4th note was the F. That's an F major chord. It's just going to have the capital letter. G major chord just has the capital letter. If you have a minor chord, though, we still use the capital letter, like our starting point was D. So we use the second note of the scale as our starting point. We use a capital D, but we'll use a lowercase m next to it. So D minor, E minor, A minor. Okay, so when you're seeing the chords on the chord charts, that's what that means. Lowercase m is a minor. If it's just a capital, it's a major. And again, minors sound sad, majors sound happy. When you're using like Nashville notation or number system, the capitalized Roman numeral means a major chord, and the lowercase Roman numeral means a minor chord. So we could keep building those, but we're always going to see that the 1, the 4, and the 5, they're all major. The 2 and the 3 and the 6, they're all minor. Always going to happen that way. That's just the way it is. Some things ain't never going to change. That's just the way it is. Okay, I'm going to take a minute. The next 15 minutes, or a few minutes, I guess I don't know exactly how long it's going to take me, we are going to explore the primary colors. And when I say primary colors, I'm just using an analogy. The sound of the 6 basic chords as they are in a 1, 3, 5. okay? So we're not adding in modified chords like minor sevens and dominant sevens and suspendeds and twos and add nines and that kind of stuff. All right, so analyzing the primary colors. I'm going to do this with, I wish I could do this with the keyboard because it's easier to make the chords and hear their sounds. But I'll do it with the guitar, and so you can hear the sounds a little bit. But we're really going to deep dive into the relationships between these chords. So everything else, there's really not going to be any new vocabulary here. We will have this new word, relative minor, and we will get back to what that means as well. But easiest to look at this stuff in the key of C because there's no sharps or flats. That's kind of it. So we're going to compare all of these chords, compare it to the root, the one chord, which is kind of like the home of the key. All right. So let's take the one chord. The one chord out of the key of the major scale, which is the C major scale here. The one chord is a 1, 3, 5, starting with 1 on the major scale. Okay, so that would be it, 1, 3, 5. Now these are the same notes of the major scale, C major scale. We've just started it with F, as you can see, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. So it's the same notes that we're using, we just have a different starting point. Okay, and here's our 1, 3, 5 for the 4 chord, which starts on the 1, 2, 3, 4th note. Okay, so here's the C chord happening. Here's the F chord happening. So the first thing that I will notice is that we do have a shared note. And what's interesting about this shared note, I guess I am going to lie, this is a new vocabulary word. Sometimes the root is also called the tonic. I've heard it called that, so that's one thing to keep in mind, I guess. But we have this shared note of the root, okay? So the root is like the home of the key. It's like the starting point of the major scale. The root chord, it kind of has that home feel to it. So the fact that we're sharing a note with the home, that's interesting. We'll see how that plays out in a minute. But the rest of this, you've taken your third and it's gone up. You've taken your fifth and it's gone up. So that kind of, hope you can see that. So you'll have this sense or this sound of going up. Okay? So we have the C chord. We're going to go from that to the F. Yeah, so it kind of has a step up sound. Yeah, that comes from those kind of shifting up. But we also have this tonic, or the root is the same. Oops. That's the C note. So I'm going to play the C and the F chord with the singing of the C. Have that common. Okay, so the things you should notice is that it kind of sounds nice. It's nice by itself. You can probably, if you just stop at a random spot on either note, of course, the root, the home, the C, that sounds like a good place to stop. It's home. But if I'm just playing around and I end on the F, it's actually not a terrible place to stop. And that's because it has that home, that tonic, the root, the C, okay? So it sounds like it sounds well on its own, it stands well on its own, it has a nice happy sound because it's a major. It has this step up feel or sound, so that's nice. We continue this little continuity with the root, which is great. Let's move on to the 5 chord. When looking at the 5 chord, you will notice that compared to the 1 chord, the C, we also have a shared note, but it's not the root, it's the 5th. Okay, so worth noting, there is some continuity, there is some shared sound between the 1 chord and the 5 chord. But you've taken the first and the third of the 1 chord, and they've gone down. So you'll almost get this sense of falling when you hear it. And I would draw your attention to something here. Notice how this is the root of the key. C is the root note. Since we don't have that here, if we have this B, it's gone down a step, you'll get this feeling of sounding unresolved, like you need to go somewhere. You might land on the 5 chord, but you gotta go somewhere with it. So, if we play the 1 chord, the C, and then I go to the G. See how it sounds like it's falling? And that really comes from this tonic falling down, the root falling down. 1, 1, 1, 1, 5. Or I guess I was doing the 5th. No, I wasn't. Okay? And if you just stop there, it kind of, if I'm just rolling and I do another F, and I just stop at the 5, it doesn't sound like it should stop there. It sounds like it should go somewhere else. It's an abrupt change. It just feels like it has to resolve. Okay, and the resolving happens is when we go back to that root. So I will leave that one there from now. Let's go to the 6 minor chord. And there's a reason why I'm skipping the 2 and the 3 for now. The 6 minor chord, compared to the 1, this is the 1 chord, and I've just kind of backed it up this way so that we can have these extra notes to look at and compare. But here is the 6 chord, the A, C, E. Notice you have 2 shared notes, so it's very similar. And one of them is the root. So there's a lot of continuity going on here. The 5th has gone up, perhaps you could say. But remember, the minor is a sad sounding, a little melancholy. But we have a really similar sound to the 1 chord. Okay, so here's the 1 chord. Here's the A minor. So you got that sad sound initially, like it's jarring. But there's really only 1 note difference between the 2. Sounds very nice though. It's a very pretty melancholy sound, if there is such a thing. But here's one thing I would like to make a note of. Because we're sharing so much, the 6 minor chord is always what's called the relative minor of the 1. Okay? So, and you can find a relative minor from any major, and the formula is always the relative minor to any major is 1.5 steps down. So remember, we have no half step between B and C, but we have an A sharp or a B flat on the chromatic scale. So we have we have 1/2 step and then a half for the middle and then another half. We have 1.5 steps. So that's a minor. That's a step and a half. So if you take any major chord, if you want to find its relative minor chord, you just back it down 1.5 steps. So that'll be interesting for later. That's what a relative minor is. It is the minor chord that's formed from the same key, a step and a half below. Okay, all relative minors share those same characteristics, by the way, but let's move on. The 2 chord, compared to the 1, here's C, E, G, or 1 chord, notice there is nothing the same. So it'll be quite the jarring sound. As a matter of fact, the 2 minor chord is the only chord in the key that doesn't share anything with the 1 chord. So that's quite interesting. So let's take a look at the sound. And I think that's what you'll find is the less things they share, the more jarring it sounds, the less comfortable it sounds to your ear. So here's C major. Sorry, I went a little ham. C major, and here's D minor. Quite the change. See? It's quite the change. So very abrupt. Nothing stayed the same. It doesn't really sound like if I play in the other chords. I'm going to play the other ones that we've done. C, A minor, F. That's D minor. It just doesn't feel like you can leave it there. It's got to go somewhere too. So it's one that doesn't really feel like it's home. It's not very comfortable. So you can't really live in the 2 minor chord land very long in this key. The other ones, maybe. Let's go on to the... Did I really skip the 3rd minor chord? Oh, okay. I see what I did here. Okay, so the 2 minor chord, we already compared it to the 1, but I would like to compare it to the 4 chord, the F. And the reason why I want to compare it is because the F is a major. If we just backed off the major 1.5 steps, that's D. So the D minor is the relative minor. Yeah, I have that here. It's the relative minor to the 4 chord. So there's lots in common going on here. And it does share, again, the 1 of the relative major. But yeah, there's a lot of things going in common. So let me show you that from the perspective of the F. So if I have an F, whoops, to the D minor, you have so very similar. One's just happy and one's melancholy. So let's move on to the 3 chord. When compared to the 1 chord, C major in this key, C, E, G, the E minor chord, the third note, the minor chord, the chord made from the 3rd, which happens to be minor in this key, it does share 2 out of 3 things with the 1 chord. So why isn't it the relative minor, you might say? Well, notice what's missing is the tonic, or the root. So, since that's missing, we don't consider it the relative minor because it's missing that key piece of being related to it. That's the most important DNA factor of the 1 chord is the tonic, the root of the key. So, but it is interesting that it shares so much with it. But also, I would draw your attention to the fact that our tonic, our root, has actually fallen. So you almost get this sense of the same thing as the 5 chord, the G major, or the G major chord. So I'll play this one in a minute, but let's go ahead and compare that to the G major chord. So remember, the G major is the 5 chord, and actually if you back off the major chord, 1, that's a whole step and a half a step, we get this relative minor. So E is the relative minor of the G major. So they should have a lot in common, and they do. They have 2 pieces in common, and compared to the 5 chord, it's 1. The 5 chord's 1. That's not the 1 of the key, but that's the 5 chord's 1. It shares the tonic of the 5 chord. So, since they have a lot in common, they sound very similar. But anyway, let's go back to some of these and compare. So the 1 chord. If I do the 1 chord and I change that to the E minor, so even though it's sharing 2 out of 3 things, it really feels like it's made a shift downwards. Let's compare it to the G major. So G major chord, E minor. Yeah. So even though it shared just as much, it shared 2 out of 3 notes with the G major as it did with the C major, because it's the relative minor of the G, it actually sounded closer to me in my ear than that one. But a key thing to remember from all of this talk is that there's some certain, the 3 minor chord has a fall effect from the 1 chord. The 5 chord also has a fall effect from the 1 chord. So that goes in both directions. If you're going from the 5, you can go up to the 1. You can have this sense of rising up to the home. Or you can start with the home, the 1 chord, and fall down to the 5. But either way, it has this sense of falling, okay? So there's another thing that maybe, well, I might leave that alone. So yeah, that's the sense of falling. You should also recognize that the relative minors are all present to their majors, okay? So we have the 2 minor chord is the relative minor of the 4 major. So they're very similar to each other. They share 2 out of 3 things. The 3 minor chord is the relative minor of the 5 major, so the G. So those are very similar sounding things. And the other things I would just say is like the big 4 chords, they all share the tonic. They all share that C, well, I guess not the 5 chord, but it's a major. So mostly your big chords that you're going to play are all your major chords. So the C major, F major, the 1 major, the 4 major, the 5 major. The 6 minor is going to be very common to play because it's relative to the 1, it's the relative minor. So those all are going to sound very happy or very similar together. That's why most of our songs are made out of the 1 major, the 4 major, 5 major, and 6 minor. And that's why there's different sharps and flats in a key as well. Anyways, I just had the random thought compared to the circle of fifths. But anyway, I think I might want to go ahead and move on to a different section here. All right, that's it.